Okay, hello everybody, welcome back again. We're almost about ready to start. Thanks for being here, everyone. We just have a minute and a half and then we'll get things going. Hi, Gary. Hi, Cameron. Hope you guys are doing well. Hey, Rachel. Hey, Ronald. Good to see you guys. Oh, not to worry, Ronald. It's okay. I know that it's the end of the semester and there's all kinds of reasons why sometimes it's harder to be as consistent, but I totally understand. It's not to worry. Hey, Danny. Hey, Haley, and Andrea, Brooklyn. Always awesome to check in with you guys. Just a few moments here. Get going. Yeah, I gotta get a new set. Not the ones. It's decent. Hey guys, I know it's 5:30, but let me just get my marker situation in order. A whole bunch of them are not going to work. Just take these to the side. Okay. Well, anyways, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for being here. So, and hi there, Sol, and everyone else. All right, so we have 2 more lectures before we have our final exam review session. Next week is an important week because, first of all, Tuesday, you guys know your second essay is due. And then we have a lecture on Tuesday, and then Thursday next week is our review session. So I'm going to distribute over the weekend the study guide for everybody so that you can start looking at it and getting prepared for the review session and for the final. But that's about it in the class. We have today's lecture, Tuesday's lecture, essays submitted, next Thursday review session, and then it's the final. I'll be sure to make quick work of the essays that you guys turn in on Tuesday so that I can get all the grading complete in advance of the final so that you can check with me for your score on that or for the whole class or whatever. But that's just the announcement I'm starting the class with. We all know we're coming close to the end of the semester, so yeah, it's down to the 2 things, the final and the second paper. Some people have sent me some drafts if they wanted comments on the paper. I'm always happy to take a look at those, but like I did say before, it'll be a little harder for me to get to your draft if you want to submit it, unless you get it to me maybe before the end of the weekend. So that would just be something to think about if you're interested in that. Of course, you don't have to do anything with submitting a draft, but sometimes it helps and comments are always good. So you'll do what you see fit for that. Okay, guys, so then let's just get back to our lecture series. We have 2 lectures that we're going to use to cover one last topic. Kind of, we'll get a little taste of this topic since some of the essays that were devoted to it are going to have to be cut for time, but we'll at least get 2 or 3, hopefully 2, maybe 3 on this last subject. So, okay, one more look back before we take one more step forward. We started the class with philosophy of religion, arguments pertaining to the existence and the nature of God. Then we all focused on ethics for a little while, the theory of morality, what makes an action right or wrong. Moving on from that, we looked at epistemology, the theory of knowledge. What does it take to know something? What's the definition of knowledge? What are some critiques of the literature on that that have come up over the years? And then it was the metaphysics of time. We talked about time travel. What's the difference between Einstein's way of looking at time and the older version of space and time that Newton had. Then it was the philosophy of mind, which we've just now wrapped up. And as we can all remember, obviously that was about consciousness and thought and what's the basis or the nature of it. Is it physical? Is it not physical? Or what? Okay, and We closed that whole unit with a couple notes on Alan Turing and J.J.C. Smart. So now we're on to the very, very last thing, and that's life and death. So two big questions that everybody has to kind of grapple with as a human being. Some of the most tough and personal questions. How should you live your life? Is there a good way to live? Is there something that would make a human being's life go as well as it possibly could? Or is there any rational or intelligent thing that can be said about that question? You're going to learn that there have been arguments and views on this that have been stated throughout history about what makes a human being's life go well. Clearly, we're not the first generation of human beings. Human beings have been around for, at a minimum, 100,000 years. So there's a lot of different written accounts going back in time that try to give an answer to the question, what makes somebody's life go well? What should we be doing if we want our lives to be good lives? And since each one of us is living a human life, each one of us wants it to go well, learning about that or hearing some of the perspectives of people who've come before is useful, and it's something that you can bring to apply to your own life. Another thing is death. Is death bad? People have to die, unfortunately, and so you could wonder, is it a bad thing? Is it tragic? Is it scary, the concept of death, or is it not? And there are different arguments on that topic as well. So we're going to start off with life, and maybe we'll have a little look at death on Tuesday. But today, it's all about what makes a human life go well. So I'm going to try and show you guys the view about this that comes from ancient Greece. So some of the earliest written accounts in the Western tradition in philosophy trace from the world of ancient Greece. We learned a little bit about the philosopher that we're going to talk about right now when we studied epistemology a couple weeks ago, and that's Plato and his teacher Socrates. So the writing that I'm going to begin the meeting with right now is an essay by the ancient Greek Plato. Well, it's not even just an essay, it's a part of a book that he wrote. So let me give you some information on this. Okay, so back to ancient Greece one more time. We're reviewing the ideas and writing of the Greek figure Plato, and he lived from 428 until 347 BC. So that's thousands of years ago, 2,400 years approximately before now, and 428 years before the Common Era. That's Plato's life and dates. As you guys remember, his main teacher was Socrates, and Socrates was put on trial and executed for teaching philosophy, but the torch was passed to Plato, and he established the academy, and we are here today still talking about philosophy thousands of years later. Okay, well, the main book that Plato is most famously known for is a very classic work, which is called The Republic. Okay, The Republic, or sometimes it's called Plato's Republic, is Plato's book that tries to explain this question: what would make a human society in the best condition possible? What is the ideal utopian human society? So The Republic is Plato's description of what he thinks would be the ideal form of human social organization or society. And he calls that idealized form of government that he describes the Republic. So his book, The Republic, is a long explanation and defense of what would make a society the best society that it could possibly be. And while he presents this account of the best possible society, he also gives us a view about what would make the individual life as good as it could be. In fact, there are very, very close parallels between what Plato says would be the ideal society and what would be the ideal human individual life. Because he believes that an individual human being like me or you is actually a microcosm of the society writ large. So there's a kind of structural similarity that he presents between the ideal form of social organization and the ideal individual human life. So I'm going to have to build a bridge to his account of what the ideal human life is by starting with his discussion of what would make a society the best society it could be. So that's what we're going to begin with. What is the ideal form of society according to Plato, and then how will that give us insight as to how a human life should go, or what would be the best way a human life could go? Okay, the book is called The Republic. In our textbook, as they do in many different cases throughout the book, they take one small section of it, an excerpt, and they give it a new title for the purposes of this anthology. So in the book, you'll see that it's called On the Harmony of the Soul. But just so we're clear, this really is just a small section lifted from the bigger work of the Republic. But anyway, in our textbook, On the Harmony of the Soul. And it'll become clear as we go through this discussion why he calls, or why the editors call this On the Harmony of the Soul. Basically a little spoiler alert preview. You know, the human soul, he thinks, has to be balanced and have each part of it in the proper role and doing its job. And so if the parts of the soul are in good balance and harmony, then your life goes well. But we're going to have to build up to that. Okay, so that's just stage setting, author's name, his dates, the main book, and then the separate title given in our anthology for it. So now let's go and launch into what's the ideal human society? What is up with this republic according to Plato? Okay, so now, in Plato's Republic, he argues that the ideal human society would have three divisions. There would be three main parts to the Republic. Okay, so let me list what they are. Okay, so one of these three parts is what he calls the merchants. The merchant class. This is the largest group in society, so this is the largest of the three divisions just in terms of how many people are in it. And what the merchants do is they're like basically the same as modern day workers, employees, and business owners who basically produce goods and services for a profit. So that's the merchant class. They're people who produce goods and services that they sell and trade for a profit. So I'm going to let Peachy stay here for a minute while I write the definition. I'll put her down. Don't worry as soon as I get it up there. But anyway. Okay, so Peachy, come on. The merchants. They produce goods and services that they can sell and trade for profit. So that could be a very broad category. This is people who own businesses of all kinds, who operate, who are vendors for goods and services, and who basically sell, trade the things that they produce or the services that they provide for money, and they make profit off of that. That's the largest group in the Republic, and it's something that we can relate to in, of course, our modern day as well. But it's not the only part of the Republic, so let's move to the next. After merchants, or a second group, it is the warriors. Okay, now the warriors, their deal, they're not there to produce goods and services to sell and trade for profit. The warriors are like the equivalent of our modern day security and defense forces. This is like the military and police. So these are people who provide for, they fight and defend the Republic against either if there's external enemies, like, against foreign invasion, but also if there was internal instability, and they had to like quell an insurrection or return peace, then they would also be responsible for that. So their job, their function within the Republic is to provide for its security and defense. Okay, so you got merchants, you got warriors, but there's still one more category, and it's all important. Sorry, Peachy. That third category is what he calls the kings. So over here, kings. The kings are the people who who are like the political leadership class. So this is like the equivalent of our heads of state, presidents, prime ministers, actual monarchs, if such there be. And also it would include congressional bodies, if there's a government by committee of that kind, or a parliament. So the people who make the rules, the people who institute the laws, also those who have the authority to order these warriors into service and action. Okay, so that's the kings, and that's their part, and that's their role. So create laws and policies and preside over the republic. Okay, so you see that we've got three parts of the republic. Now, let me tell you a little bit about how Plato thought we should divide people into these three categories, because that's actually something very different from the way our society today, you know, Western liberal democracy, constitutional democracy that we're living in, it's a little different. There's some similarities because you can see rough parallels between these parts of society and our modern day lives and our modern world, but there's some differences too. So for example, in our society, we tell people that you can really just join any part of society that you want based on what your interests and desires are. We don't place limits on you based on the kind of person you are. So for example, in our society, even if you're like the biggest, toughest, strongest person, and you'd be really good at providing defense as a soldier or police officer, but you want to instead, you know, open up a business that sells vacuum cleaners or something, and then that's going to be your life job, you're free to do that in our society. Or on the other hand, suppose that you're like the wisest and most intelligent, intellectually gifted person, and you'd be a very good like political leader, but you want to just join the military and fight, you're free to do that in our society. But in Plato's Republic, it's not the same. Because in Plato's Republic, people are actually placed in the category of society where their skills and natural abilities most incline them to be helpful for the republic as a whole. So you don't have the freedom to choose. You're going to be placed in the group according to a rigorous system of evaluation and testing that's carried out over the course of your life. So here's the way that system basically worked. Everybody's placed in primary education when they're young, and people are given like basic lessons in fundamental topics, mathematics, physical education, music, okay? When they complete that primary education, people are now like young adults and they're done with their primary education, but they have to take this big comprehensive exam and test. And that test is very important because it's going to determine which category you go into. So at the conclusion of your primary education, you take this comprehensive exam on all the different subjects you've been learning. And there's two ways this can go. You're either going to surpass that standard on the exam, or you're going to fall below it and not pass it. So suppose that you're one of the people that, you know, you didn't do so well on that exam and you didn't pass. Well, if you fail at that first hurdle after your primary education, you don't pass this test, boom, you're in the warrior class. Because basically the thought of society of the republic is, well, you're not the most intellectually gifted, best and brightest in that sense. So your biggest contribution to society is just going to be like your physical strength and vitality as a soldier. So people failing this first big exam, go into the warrior class. But some people pass, right? So suppose that you pass through that hoop. You pass the big exam. Now you get appointed to a secondary course of even higher education. And now the subjects become more advanced, more complicated. And when that is over with, your secondary education, you're taking another exam. You take the second exam that's more advanced as well. And once again, there's two results that could happen. You could do well and pass, or you could do not as well and not pass. So suppose that you're one of those people who passed the first test, you're not a warrior, but you failed the second one after your secondary education. In that case, you're placed in the merchant class, because in this way, the society, the republic feels that, okay, you are not on the lowest possible tier of like intellectual or academic achievement, so you're not going to be a warrior, but also you didn't pass the second test, so you're not the most like cream of the crop, best and brightest that we really want to be our king. So you're going to instead be a merchant using the intellectual skills and talents you developed in some education that you have had. And that's where most people end up in this group. But suppose you're one of those few who even surpassed the second exam, right? Now, you get appointed to a third tier of even higher education that extends well into your adult life, even into maybe middle age. But when you finish that third course of education, now you just are appointed into the realm of kings. So that is a much different way, first of all, for people to be placed within whatever social category they're going to end up being in than ours, which gives you much more like liberty to choose. But also, it's different because it's not democracy at all, okay? In fact, Plato was very clear about this. It's not an accident. He says democracy, he's very skeptical of it because he thought that if you don't have people who've been sort of screened out by this long educational process, so that we know that the people who end up being the kings are the most intelligent few, the wisest few people, then if you allow it to be that people take power and positions of authority based on democratic elections, then you could just have a tyranny of the majority, or you could have a tyrant that emerges. In fact, that's exactly what he thought would happen. According to Plato, and I guess Socrates, because he's his teacher and they both talk about these things, until you get the Republic, this enlightened form of despotism basically, he thought that society would perpetually cycle between three non-ideal forms of government. So basically he thought if you institute democracy, it'll last for a while, but in the late stages of democracy, there will be some tyrant that will emerge that will capture a majority of the votes, and then that person will, you know, become this tyrannical leader that will dismantle the democratic protections of democracy. And so now we switch to tyranny. So once the tyrant seizes power by winning a majority somehow, maybe by making like a appeal to like nativism or whatever the case may be, propaganda, now we get a tyrant. And when the tyrant is in power, they last for a while, but eventually powerful oligarchs seize power back from the tyrant, and then we have an oligarchy. And he thought after a while, the oligarchs are going to be under public pressure to restore power to the people, and then they return to democracy, and that leads to another tyranny, and it just keeps going on a cycle. He said the only way to get off of this kind of, you know, Ferris wheel of democracy, tyranny, oligarchy, and then over and over again is to have the republic. So yeah, people don't win elections in the republic. They have to like graduate to become kings and go all the way through their education. So that is important to him because he wanted it to be impossible for a person that's not smart, that's an imbecile, or not capable of making careful decisions based on evidence to actually arrive at the position of the highest power. And this system would prevent that because you would have failed the test earlier and you would never been up there. There's all kinds of other protections against corruption that he builds into the system. Like if you're going to be a king, everybody knows that you're not allowed to have children. So that prevents people from doing it because they want to have a legacy for like their own selfish reasons. Also, kings are not allowed to have great wealth. And so that's another thing that's supposed to prevent people from doing it for the wrong reasons. So you only want to do it because you're going to have like wise choices and good leadership, not because you're going to like bequeath some kind of fame and fortune or legacy or for your own enrichment. But anyways, that's a difference between his system and ours. Now, next, to each of the three parts of the Republic, Plato said that if they're doing their job as well as they can, if they're functioning at their highest level, then they would show a virtue. Now, virtue is a word that the Greeks use sometimes to refer to a quality that something would have if it was able to do its job at a very high level, if it was able to perform its function at a high level. So let me quickly write down that term and definition here. So it is just an attribute or quality that something has when it is able to perform its function excellently well. So that's the definition. Sorry for the glare. Let me try to fix that if I can. So you can see the top portion now, I hope. If not, I'll read it again. It says, virtue, an attribute that something has when it is able to perform its function excellently well. Let me give you an example of this so that it kind of makes even more sense. Okay, so one thing that's a random, just household item is a kitchen knife. Okay, now what is a kitchen knife there to do? We all know this. It's to cut vegetables, meat, food, whatever in the kitchen to prepare food. So the function of a knife is to cut. So what is the virtue of knives then, or the virtue of a kitchen knife? The quality, the attribute that if it has this attribute, it's going to be a good knife that's good at doing its thing. So good knives are what kind of knives? What's the virtue of a knife? The attribute that when had, this is a good knife. Good, exactly, Ronald, being sharp. Being sharp. So if a knife is sharp, it can cut things well, and then it can do its job very well. If it's a dull knife, it can do its job, but not as well, you see? So the virtue of the thing is just, again, it's that quality that when it has it, whatever the thing is, it's able to do its function at a good high level. So Plato said that there's actually a virtue that can be found in each of the three parts of the Republic. So each of these parts of the Republic has like a function or a job to perform for the sake of the society as a whole. And he thinks there's a single virtue for each of the three parts, a quality that when shown in that part of society will allow it to do its job excellently well. So now I'm going to try and tell you guys about the virtue of the three parts of the Republic. Okay. So the arrow below the three parts is now going to point towards the virtue that is unique or that is distinctive of that part of the Republic. So let's start with the merchants again. What do the merchants do? They produce goods and services and trade and sell those things for profit. But according to Plato anyway and Socrates, what is the virtue of merchants? The quality that makes them good merchants that are good for their republic is when they have what is called temperance. Okay, temperance is the virtue of the merchant class. And let me explain that and define it for you one time. So temperance. So temperance is a word perhaps we don't always use, but what it means is having moderation and self-control when it comes to your desires and your appetites. Okay, so temperance, moderation and self-control over your desires. So merchants produce goods and services that they sell and that they trade for profit, right? That's their function, that's their job, their duty, their task in the society of the Republic. But if they're going to be good merchants that are not like corrupt, fraudulent, selling you rip-off stuff, like scamming you with bad products at an inflated rate, if these are going to be good merchants that don't bring the whole society down, then they have to have a little bit of moderation and self-control over their desires. What merchants want to do is they desire to profit and to make money and to have additional wealth. That's not a problem. They should be doing that, but they shouldn't get so carried away with their desire for wealth and profit that they become corrupt and poor at the job they're supposed to do. Like if they become too greedy, essentially, and they can't keep their desires in check, then they're going to start selling you things that are poorly constructed at an inflated rate. Maybe they'll even start trying to influence the other parts of the society to their benefit. Like, so then that'll lead to financial corruption and mismanagement. So it's no problem that these people produce goods and services for profit. They should, but they also should keep that balance with a little bit of self-control and moderation, temperance, in other words. Otherwise, they'll become too greedy, and we will have a merchant class that's selling everybody bad things at an inflated cost, and it's going to bring the whole society down. Okay, the next group, of course, are the warriors. Their job is not to produce goods and services for trade and profit, but instead to provide security and defense. So if they are going to be good warriors that are good at providing for defense and security, then they have to have the virtue of courage. Okay, so courage, or sometimes it's called bravery, but I'll just use courage here. And courage we could define as just willingness to face danger when it's necessary and right. Okay. There it just says courage, willingness to face danger when it's right and necessary. So how can people be good soldiers, police officers, fighting forces if they are not willing to face danger when it's called on? If you have warriors that don't have courage, then they're going to be bad warriors. They're going to say, you know what, this is a little too dangerous for me. I think I'm going to have to hold off on entering into this dangerous situation. I'm scared. You don't want police officers, military members, and other people that are in those type of critical roles to be afraid to do their job because they're just too scared of the danger. So courage is necessary to be effective in the position that the warriors are in. So when they're good warriors, they have that virtue of courage. Next is the kings. And the kings are all important because they run the whole system, and they're at the head of the republic. So he says it's simply wisdom. We want these kings that are making decisions for the benefit of the whole society, that are setting the policies that command the military and everything else. We want them to be wise so that they can make careful decisions based on proper evidence. So that's wisdom. Ability to make careful decisions. They're not just like rash decisions or hasty, poorly considered decisions, but to make careful decisions based on proper evidence. If we have people that are in the position of kings that are running the whole society, that have that much power and control and authority, then they should be wise people who make good decisions for the benefit of the whole society with consideration to the evidence. If we had leaders in the king position that were not wise, but were stupid or whatever, then they would make poor decisions based on bad principles without even considering the proper evidence. And that would be not good for the whole society, and it would bring it down. So in the end, he says this: you want to live in the best possible society, then look at the Republic. The Republic is the ideal society according to the Greek thought. It's a society where people are placed in the category where their aptitude most offers them the ability to be a good contributing member to the society, and it's determined on the basis of test and evaluation. Then the three parts of society should each exhibit the virtue that is distinctive of them. So the merchants should have temperance, the warrior should have courage, and the king should be wise. If that is so, if everyone is in the proper part of society and they all, each of the three, show their virtue, and furthermore, and this is key, if they all live in harmony, so now we get that word harmony of the soul kind of coming into play, they have to cooperate. They have to not fight with each other or try to overthrow each other. They need to each do their job, but stay in their lane, to borrow a phrase. So basically, these merchants and warriors, they should not try to encroach on the power of the kings. They should not try to overthrow or attempt a coup against these kings. They should peacefully and willfully submit to the proper rule of the kings. So society starts to break down, and the republic gets all destroyed if these parts try to seize the leadership role from the king. And also vice versa. The king should not be micromanaging, business decisions or battlefield decisions, because their proper place and their role is to institute law and policy. So that's the best ideal society. It's the republic where we have three divisions. People are placed in their proper category, all submit to the proper rule of the kings. They do their job according to their virtue. Interestingly, these kings that are being mentioned in this whole discussion, Plato called those philosopher kings because basically he thought that the kind of people who had reached the summit of power through this long series of tests would be those that, are like philosophers, like me, I guess. So, he really thought philosophers are the wisest people, and so they would be the most fit to rule. Now, it's not really, I guess, like that perhaps in society, but at least not in the modern liberal democracies that we have. But there's a lot of fair criticism of the Republic, too, on other grounds. Okay, so next, though, we have to say, how does this tell us about how to live as individuals? That's the point that we still have to learn. So what Plato thought is that the Republic bears very close similarities to the structure of the individual human soul. So the Greek thought did believe in the existence of the immortal soul. Just like Descartes and those dualists and many, just everyday religious people believe in the soul, something that is immortal, something that lives forever. It's not necessarily just the same thing as your physical body. They believed in the soul. And they also thought that the soul that we each have has also got three parts. And basically, Plato argues that the soul is kind of a microcosm. It's like a miniature state, because the three parts of the soul are roughly parallel and comparable to the three parts of the Republic. Okay, so that's where we're going to go now. This is the bridge that we built. We start with the Republic, and now I'm going to tell you about the three parts of the human soul, and now you'll see how that compares very closely to that. Okay. Okay, so so here's the title or the heading: Three Parts of the Human Soul. Okay, so for one, you've got a part that he calls the appetitive part. Appetitive part of the soul. Oh, Cameron, in the Republic, one doesn't have more power than another, like a harmony, like a hierarchy. Are you asking about the three parts of the Republic, the warriors, merchants, and kings? The kings have the most power. The kings have all the power, really. They're the ones that can set the laws. They're the ones that can tell the military what to do. Yeah, so Cameron, they each have an important job to do, and society wouldn't function, the Republic wouldn't function and would not be well ordered or organized without each part. You have to have people to produce goods and services, because we all need those to live and to thrive. You also have to have some kind of defense against threats, either as external or internal, and to uphold laws, sometimes by force if needed. And then you also have to have people who make the careful policy decisions that give us a legal structure and a framework to live in. So he does think there's these three parts, but the kings are the ones that hold ultimate power. So the other parts could try to like seize power from the king, but that's where Plato would argue the society is breaking down and becoming disordered and unjust. These kings deserve to rule. They're not corrupt people because they didn't just win elections by maybe making a weird message that captured a majority of votes, even though they have their own private ambitions to become more powerful or to exploit their position of power. So the long drawn out process of education and testing is supposed to screen off any ill motivations, and therefore everyone's supposed to respect and defer to these kings because they're smart and they deserve to be deferred to. They're not just powerful, they're wise. So that's what I guess I could say. They hold the power, but it's supposed to be justified because of the proof they've given that they are wise. But to this, okay, one of the three parts of the soul is the appetitive part. The appetitive part of the soul is the part of you that has, as the word shows, appetites and desires for things that you want to fulfill. So having appetites and desires that you want to fulfill. So that part of you that wants things, that's the appetitive part of your soul according to Greek thought. Meaning, we're not just talking literally about appetites for food, but that's one case. It could be of any kind. It could be the desire that you have for global travel, or for certain experiences, or certain possessions, or like you want a PS5 or something. You have a desire and an appetite for that, and you're going to keep thinking about it until you fulfill it and get it, right? So sometimes it's possessions, sometimes it's food or drink, sometimes it's experiences of certain kinds. One thing that you guys seem to desire is to graduate, right? That's something that you want to fulfill and have it actually happen. So you're working towards the fulfillment of that desire. Sometimes it's relationships with people. Whatever the case is, whatever it is that a man or a woman or a person, whoever, can desire, those are their desires and appetites. That's the appetitive part of their soul. Okay, so that part of the soul, the appetitive part, he compares that to the merchant class, because the similarity is that merchants want to profit and make money to gain additional wealth. So they, at the heart of their part of the Republic, is a desire for profit, wealth, and more money. So they're characterized by a kind of desire as well. So he thinks that within you, the soul, the part of the soul that you have, the appetitive part, it's kind of like a merchant class in a republic by microcosm. Okay, so next, the second part of your soul is what he calls the spirited part. So the spirited part is a part of you that is competitive, has a lot of pride, has a lot of passion. The part of you that loves to win and showcase skill, but hates to be disrespected and hates to lose. So that's another part of you. Competitive, prideful, passionate, loves to win, hates to lose, etc. That's that part of you. Okay, so think of the part of you that's like activated when you're really into cheering on your favorite sports team. You know, you want them to win, and you kind of feel like allied to their cause. Like, let's get this victory, let's win. And you're competitive and you're cheering them on. Or you might be one of the athletes on the field yourself. And so demonstrating your skill and ability in the effort to try and come away with the win, that's the spirited part of you in that case. It's also the part of you that would take offense if you felt like you're being disrespected, because it's a part of you that has a lot of pride and passion. It's also the part of you that would be willing to act in order to defend yourself or other people or important values that you care about. So the spirited part of you is like the warrior class. It's the part of you that does not want disrespect, that wants to be recognized and respected, that wants to showcase its ability, compete, win, hates to lose. So it's like the warrior class because in a similar sense, they try to fight, defend, they have a lot of pride in their country, and they're willing to act in a defensive way if needed. Okay, so that's the spirited part of you. And then there's the third part, which as you guys know, there's only one part of the republic left to compare with. So this third part compares to the kings, and that is what he calls the rational part of your soul. So it's like the intellect, the intelligent, wise decision-making part. That's the rational part. Okay, and so that's the part of you that makes careful decisions based on proper evidence. So with the rational part of your soul, which compares with the kings, that in the description of Plato is the point or the part of you that should be in the leadership position too. Just like the kings preside over the republic, determine its laws, policies, and have control over the lower parts, the rationality within you should be like the king of your soul. That should be the part that has the most authority and control. That's the one that you should defer to and allow to lead you through life. So if you want to live the best human life possible, now the picture's starting to kind of come into focus. You should try to have the three parts of your soul, each doing their part according to their virtue. Okay, so let's come back to the virtues again. The virtue of each of the three parts of the human soul is parallel to the virtue, is the same virtue that we found in the republic case. So what's the virtue of the appetitive part then? Who knows? Who could just tell me that based on what we said? Since the appetitive part is comparable to the merchants, the virtue of your appetitive part is to have what? What do you think there? Yes, temperance, correct. So, well, merchant's the category, Gary, but I was asking what's the virtue of both. Yeah, so your appetitive part of your soul should have temperance, meaning that it should have self-control and moderation. It's good for you to desire things and to seek the fulfillment of the things that you desire. But if you allow your appetites to get too powerful, then they can sometimes overwhelm you and cause you to do things that go against your better judgment. So you've got to kind of keep your appetites and desires in check. Don't become basically overly greedy or obsessed with the things that you desire. Have a healthy dose of moderation and self-control to keep that in balance. Now the spirited part of you, your competitive, prideful, passionate part that doesn't want any disrespect, wants to compete, win, that part should also have bravery and courage. Because if your spirited nature is afraid to act when it's right and necessary, then you're not going to be well served by it. So just like the warriors need to be brave and courageous to be good at their job, the spirited part of your nature also has to have courage. And then the rational part, which is supposed to run the whole show and be in the position of the leader, that part should have wisdom. Because again, if your intellect is weak and you don't have wisdom, then you really can't rely on your own rationality to make the best decisions or to even weigh the evidence in the most thorough way. So to live the best life, allow each of the three parts of your soul to do their part according to their virtue, but also make sure that none of them try to overthrow or interfere with the proper authority of the kings, or your intellect, I should say. So allow reason to rule. Allow the voice of reason and intelligence and intellect within you to rule. Do not make decisions from emotion and passion. Don't do them because of the power of your desires. Do it based on clear, rational, unbiased thinking. That's the little king in you that should be steering your course. What causes your life to go badly, or a republic to fall apart, is when these lower and subordinate parts take over and step outside of their lane and basically take over in a position of leadership, which they're not fit to do because they're not wise. So he says that fine behavior, good behavior that people praise, is always the result of having this just harmony of the soul. But bad behavior, wicked, vicious, unjust behavior, it always comes from an imbalance or from lower parts of the soul seizing too much power. So for example, let me ask you some hypothetical questions. Suppose that you wanted something and you could wait until you had the money to buy it, but you are just so, you want it so badly that you decide to commit theft to get it. You're like, I want it. I could wait, but I'm just losing my patience because I need it now, or I feel like I want it right now, so I'm going to commit an act of theft. When you do that, you're going against your better judgment. If you had just listened to reason, your reason inside of you would have said, you know, you really shouldn't do that. It's just not wise to steal. The negative consequences plus the harm to your character outweigh whatever value you might have had from getting the item through theft. But when you do the act of theft, instead of listening to your reason, which part of the soul that's not supposed to be leading has temporarily at least taken the reins and has taken control that it's not fit to take? The act of theft and similar actions of that kind, they come from which part of your soul becoming overactive and exerting more influence than it ought to? What do you think? You got three possibilities. To commit theft, to steal, it has to be that this part is going out of control. Which part? Question, you guys tell me. Yes, the appetitive part. That's right, Gabriel, because it's your appetites that you can't control. You can't curb them. You know, it's like, I had to do it, or I felt so compelled to do it because my appetites, I couldn't keep them in check. So that's bad behavior, and it results from disharmony in the soul. It results from lower parts of the soul that are not supposed to be in the position of leader, kind of committing mutiny and taking the reins of control for a moment. Or another case, I don't know, suppose that you are really tempted to cheat on a relationship that you're in. You know, you have like a proposition coming to you from somebody else you find very attractive. You know, you might be going against your better judgment to act and indulge on the appetite or the desire that you have at the moment. So that would be another case where reason's telling you one thing, but your appetites are contradicting it, and you're not going in the direction of reason, but rather the passions of the desires of the moment. Another case, okay? Suppose that someone cuts you off on the road. You're out there driving, right? And someone cuts you off, and the way they did it, it bothered you so much, you became irate, and you fly into a rage. You're now in road rage. And instead of just letting it go, your anger is overwhelming to you. You hated being disrespected like that. So you follow this person's car until they finally park, and you park behind them and step outside, harass them, and maybe beat them down, okay? This is not smart. This is not what you should do. It certainly goes against anybody's better reasonable judgment. But if that happened, and of course things like this do happen, getting into fights, you know, feeling offended, what part of your soul there has become a little too powerful at that time? Now we're talking about, yeah, so it's the spirited part, right? The spirited part of you. It couldn't set aside or let it go, that you've been disrespected. It was too much a strike against the feeling of pride and honor or whatever of the individual. So they did something, but they did it against their better judgment. Reason would have told them not to do that. And if they had a powerful enough intellect and reason, then it would have set back the ambition of their spirited nature. It would have said, I know this feels bad, but you have to let it go because it's wise to not indulge in retribution and revenge over something as momentary as that. So anyway, good behavior comes when the parts are in balance and you defer to this reason that you have inside. Now, I'll read a little bit from the book so you can see how the author put the point. He says this. Okay, so the conversation and the dialogue is happening between Socrates, Plato's teacher, and Glaucon, who is actually Plato's older brother. So this is a talk between older brother of Plato, Glaucon, and Socrates. So Socrates says, we have not forgotten that the city was just because each of the three classes in it was doing its own work. Glaucon says, I don't think we could forget that. Socrates says, then we must also remember that each one of us, in whom each part is doing its own work, will himself be just. Glaucon says, of course. So Socrates goes on. So therefore, isn't it appropriate for the rational part to rule, since it is really wise and exercises foresight on behalf of the whole soul, and for the spirited part to obey it and be its ally? So like, it's reason that should tell the spirit, hey, it's time for you to get going. It's time for you to do something because I have judged that it's a wise thing to do. But it shouldn't be this spirited thing that's making the decision because it doesn't have intelligence. It just wants to go all the time. So you have to let the reason preside. Okay, continuing. Reason and the spirited part jointly function to also control the sometimes overactive appetitive part. And it says that here, these two, having been nurtured and having truly learned their own roles and been educated in them, will govern the appetitive part, which is the largest part in each person's soul and is by nature most insatiable for money. They'll watch over it to see that it is not filled with the pleasures of the body and that it doesn't become so big and strong that it no longer does its own work, but attempts to enslave and rule over the classes that it's not fit to rule, thereby overturning everyone's life. And wouldn't those two parts do the finest job, these two parts, do the finest job of guarding the soul and body against enemies, reason by planning, spirit by fighting, following its leader, and carrying out the leader's decisions through courage? And he says, yes, that's true. So Socrates says after that, and it's because of the spirited part that we call a single individual courageous, when it preserves through pain and pleasure the declarations of reason about what to fear and what not to fear. And we call him wise because of that small part of himself that rules within him and makes those declarations and has within it the knowledge of what is good for each part and for the whole soul, which is the community of all three parts. And he says, isn't he moderate because of the friendly and harmonious relations between these parts? Namely, when the ruler and the ruled believe in common that the rational part should rule and do not engage in civil war against it. Civil war in the Republic would be like the military trying to overthrow the kings, right? Nature tries to overthrow and remove from power your intellect. Moderation is nothing other than that, both in the city and in the individual. So, he says, would a person who has this just and harmonious configuration of the soul ever commit robbery or theft? And he says no. For example, if we came to an agreement about whether someone similar in nature and training to the city had embezzled a deposit of gold or silver that they had accepted, who do you think would consider them to have done it, rather than someone that's not like them? And Glaucon says nobody would. And would they have anything to do with temple robberies, thefts, betrayals of friends in private life or public life? He says no. And would they be untrustworthy in keeping an oath or an agreement? No. And adultery, disrespect for parents, neglect of the gods, all those would come from somebody who's not got this just and harmonious configuration. And he says, yes, I agree. So are you looking for justice to be something other than this power that produces men and cities of the sort that we've described? And he says, no, I'm not. So the dream we had has been fulfilled. Our suspicion that with the help of God, we hit upon the origin and pattern of justice right at the beginning in founding our city. So if you want to live a good life, try to match your soul to the condition of the just and flourishing republic. Appoint to the highest power and position of leadership the reason within you. And allow the other parts to do their job, but not to lead. You do have a spirited nature, but if you allow that to take control, then a lot of times you're going to be flying off the handle in a rage or getting overly passionate or prideful, against your better judgment. If you allow your appetites to run the show, then it's just going to be desire after desire, and even in cases where these desires are taking you into poorly considered behavior, you're just going to keep pursuing it. I mean, think of like the life of a thrill-seeking drug addict or something, knowing the whole time, I'm really living a life that's not so healthy or good for me, but I can't tell myself to like control my appetites because they've gotten the best of me and I'm not in control. So he thinks the best way to live and the best way for you to live is to have the kind of balance he's talking about with attention to having the rational part of you lead. Now, after that, that's like the core of this essay, but after that there's a little discussion that follows with Plato, with Socrates and Glaucon. I keep saying Plato, but Plato's the writer, Socrates is the character that speaks in these writings. Anyway, Socrates and Glaucon, there's a little more they do discuss. Socrates has one more question. He says to Glaucon, well, what if you could get away with all the unjust behavior and no one would ever know about it? Would that benefit you? And he asks Glaucon that question. So hopefully you can understand this question I'm asking with Socrates' voice. He says, can injustice profit you? Can it benefit you to be unjust if nobody knows about it? You know what I'm saying? Like, could you benefit from lying, cheating, stealing, etc., as long as you don't get caught? Is the only real harm to you being caught and then being, punished or somehow held accountable? You know what I mean? Like, so do you think you'd benefit from injustice as long as you could get away with it and we know that no one would ever find out? Now, I'm understanding that you're thinking of the question, and you might be thinking, well, why not? I mean, if I could like cheat on all my exams and get a bunch of A's, I'm better off. I've got all these good grades and I didn't have to work. So yeah, that would be to my benefit. But probably it's not going to be a surprise to you to hear that from the Greek point of view and from Socrates and Plato's view, no. Even undetected unjust behavior that no one ever finds out about does not benefit you. To the contrary, you're doing harm and you're doing damage to yourself when you do that, even if nobody knows about it. So don't think, he says, that just getting away with unjust behavior makes you better off. You're not ever going to be benefited or better off from unjust behavior, and it doesn't matter if nobody in the whole world knows about it. But he wants to make that point clear through a little example. So as philosophers often do, he gives a hypothetical kind of example so you can think about his claim here, that injustice does not profit you or anyone. So let me give you his example then. And this example, again, I'm saying is to show you and everyone that reads this book why he thinks injustice is of no benefit and of no advantage to you. So the example given involves a highly creative metaphor of a three-headed creature. Okay, so I'm going to try and draw the three-headed creature here. And just bear with me because you probably have seen this throughout the term, but I'm not the most amazing artist when it comes to drawing stuff, but I'll try to do it. So here we have a creature. I'm just drawing the legs, torso, and arms first. Let's leave the heads for now. Okay, so there's three heads. One of the three heads is kind of vaguely described as a section where there's actually a bunch of little ones. So I say three-headed. It's not 100% perfect because one of the three is actually like a section with a bunch of little snapping kind of like gargoyles. Okay, so let me try to draw that even though it's a weird thing to draw. Here's the section, and here's all these little snapping gargoyles in the section. So like little heads with mouths and stuff in that area, okay? What are those guys doing? Well, that one head or whatever of the creature, these little snapping gargoyles, they're hungry. They just want to eat. They're constantly seeking out more and more. So they're like, snap, 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 bite, bite, bite. Where's the food? Need to eat it now. The little gargoyles, that's their constant thing, okay? Over here on the opposite side, another one of the three heads is like the head of a lion. You know, the noble lion, king of the jungle, proud, big lion. So that's this guy. Lion's gonna be kind of hard for me, guys. So let's see how it turns out. Okay, perfect depiction of the great lion. Okay, so that's the lion. Now the third head on this creature is just a normal human. Like a normal human face like me or you. Okay, so each of the three heads on this creature stand for one of the three parts of the soul. So based on your current understanding of those three parts of the soul, I bet you that you could give me a guess at least as to what each one of them is to stand for. So the little gargoyles that are all snapping, snapping, hungry, they represent which of the three parts? What do you think? Talk about the gargoyle section. Those are standing in metaphorically for which of the three parts? Think about what they are, think about what the three parts are all about, and you should be able to put this together. Okay, good, Andrea, exactly. They're the appetitive part of the soul because they're hungry, and they always want more. Okay, so that's one part. Over here to the lion. Noble lion, proud king of the jungle. Well, you got only two options left. What do you think does lion stand for? Spirited, good. Spirited, because passionate, proud. I mean, it's a lion, so it's not like the wise, like it's not as wise as a human would be. So obviously, process of elimination. You know, the human head is what it's the rational part of you, because a human, you know, is a more intelligent thing intellectually than like either a lion or whatever these gargoyles are. Okay, so now he says this is the next point in the discussion. I want you to imagine another thing about our creature. Suppose that although this is the case, there's three heads. When other people deal with this individual, they only see one of the three. So like from the outside looking in, you only see the appearance of one of the three heads. And which of the three do you think it is that all outside observers see? You know, it's just, they just see something that's not too strange to them. Yeah, so they just see the normal human looking head. So to anybody who's looking, doesn't seem like anything's off. It's just, there's a human, a normal human like me or you, just looking back at him. But imagine that behind the scenes, okay, what people can't see because they just see the human face presented to them. But here's what's really going on behind the scenes. Suppose that all the little gargoyle heads are like attacking and biting towards the human head and lunging at it, right? So he's freaking out, he's scared. He's like cowering in terror and fear. He's getting dominated and overwhelmed by these bitey little gargoyles. And even as he's doing that, over here on the other side, the lion is coming at him and threatening him from the other direction. So imagine that behind the scenes, what's not noticed by others is that the human has been kind of enslaved, dominated, and overwhelmed and controlled by the other two parts. Now he says this, when you behave unjustly, even if nobody knows about it, this is what you're doing to your soul. You're putting the parts of your soul at war with each other. You're putting them in tension and in conflict with each other. And that's not to your advantage because now you're not living in peace inside. And that's a harm that you're doing to yourself, the corruption of your soul and the breakdown of the harmony of your soul. That's a harm, that's a damage to you that you've got to live with. And it doesn't matter if nobody else knows about it because it's what's happening on the inside. So the metaphor is like people see this creature and they can't see anything wrong because they just see, hi, it's a human. That's like people can't see that you do things that are unjust. But when you do those unjust things, there's something happening internally to you that other people don't need to see, and it still harms you. Because you're making your reason and your intellect weak. And you are giving too much power and authority to lower parts of your soul that are not fit to rule. It would be like saying, hey, let me give the keys to my life to like a 5-year-old and let them choose what to do. Imagine you had a little brother in a household like that, and they were the ones that you gave the power to make all household decisions. You guys would be eating candy all day. You'd be watching silly cartoons all the time. You'd never get anything productive done because a child and children are great, but they're not fully rational and mature yet. So we don't give them, you know, the keys to the castle until they have a little bit more maturity and development. So you don't want lower parts of your soul to be running the show within you. You want the reason within you to lead and run the thing. Otherwise, you're harmed inside by the internal instability and conflict among the parts of your soul. So you shouldn't want that for yourself. And he's saying to you that if there are people out there, and you know you've dealt with people like this, who say, just cheat, lie, steal, and just try to get away with it. If you do, you know, you're getting an advantage. You're benefiting from that. He says people telling you to do that don't have your best interest in mind, because what they're really telling you to do is to destroy and corrupt your soul in exchange for whatever you think you're going to get as a benefit by acting that way. But when you do that, you're damaging your soul, and nobody else can do it except you. That's a very personal harm that you inflict on yourself, right? I and nobody else can corrupt your soul for you. That's something that you have to do willfully of your own volition. I can't look at you and be like, hey, you, boom, your soul's corrupt. How do you like that? Like, I can't make it happen to you. You're the one who has to decide on your own to take actions that are unjust, that are not befitting of reason. And then you undermine and corrupt your own soul. And then you have to live with it as it goes to war inside with all the various parts. So he says it would be a fool who tries to behave in ways that are unjust on the pretense that they'll get away with it and somehow think that they're winning. Let me read about that, and here's what he says. He says, I think someone said at some point that injustice profits a completely unjust person who is believed to be just. Is that true? Glaucon says yes. So Socrates says, well, then let's discuss this with him, since we've now agreed on the powers that injustice and justice have. He says, how? Okay, by creating an image of the soul in words, so that the person who says this will know what they're saying. He says, what sort of image? One like the creatures that legends tell us used to come into being in ancient times, such as the Chimera, Scylla, or the Cerberus. And he says, okay, legends tell us of those things. So Socrates continues, well, then fashion a single kind of multicolored beast with a ring of many heads that it can grow and change at will, some from gentle, some from savage animals. He says, that's work for a clever artist. However, since words are more flexible than wax, consider it done. Okay, then fashion one other kind, that of a lion, and another of a human being. But make the first one much the largest, and the other one second to it in size. He says that's easy. The sculpting is done, metaphorically. Now join the three of them into one so that they somehow grow together naturally. Then fashion around them the image of one of them, that of the human being, so that anyone who sees only the outer covering and not what's inside will think that it's just a single creature, a human being. He says, okay, done. So then Socrates, and this is a key quote, he says, okay, well, if somebody says that injustice profits the human being and that doing just things does not bring an advantage, let's tell them that they're simply saying that it is beneficial first to feed this beast and make it strong, and then also the lion and all that pertains to him, and then to starve and weaken the human being within so that he's dragged along wherever either of the other two want to go. And third, leave the parts to bite and kill one another, instead of letting them become accustomed to each other and making them friendly. And he says that's what someone who praises injustice is saying. But wouldn't someone who maintains that just things are profitable be saying first that all our words and deeds should ensure that the human being within the human has the most control? Second, that he should take care of the many-headed beast as a farmer does, feeding and domesticating the gentle heads and preventing savage ones from growing. And third, that he should make the lion his ally, care for the community of all the parts, and bring them up in such a way that they will be friends with each other and with himself. So he would let it get out of control if he didn't maintain control over these lower parts. So he has to keep them in check, and we have to empower our intellect and reason in order to do that, because otherwise we would have a tendency to just allow our passion, our pride, or our desires of the moment to make our decisions against our better rational judgment. So, and this is one more point. So from every point of view, anybody who praises justice speaks the truth. And anybody who praises injustice is speaking falsely. And that is whether we look at the matter from the point of view of pleasure, good reputation, or advantage. A praiser of justice tells the truth, but one who condemns it has nothing good to say and does not know what they're talking about. So, you know, it's very kind of bold language there from Socrates coming at you. He's telling you, be careful and don't follow the unwise counsel of those that incline you towards unjust behavior on the basis that you think you'll somehow benefit from it. It's not even about the social reward or the social penalty that comes from either being held accountable or not. It's more about your own soul. Do you really want to corrupt your soul at the cost of some presumed benefit that you can get from behaving unjustly? And he thinks that that would be a very poor decision. He makes one more example to finish this point. It's kind of like, suppose that someone said to you, hey, I got a deal. You want to do a deal with me? Tell me how much money you want. It could be any amount. And all I want in exchange is you got to give me custody of like a loved one of yours. Like this could be your mother or daughter or sister or brother, someone that you dearly love. I want you to give them to me and my crew, and we're just going to do whatever we want to that person, torture them or whatever for the rest of their life. But by the way, remember what I said first. How much money? You need $1 billion, $10 billion? What's the amount? Okay, so suppose you took this deal. You get $100 billion, all of a sudden you're Jeff Bezos now with that much wealth, and someone's out there torturing, you know, your dearly loved brother, sister, mother, father, whoever, fill in the blank. He says, do you really think that you'd be better off if that happened? I mean, you might profit financially in a certain sense, But has your life become better? No, you've corrupted your soul in a way that's irredeemable. So don't think that that's going to be to your advantage. And it's the same thing he says that you do when you sell out and undermine the reason within you in order to produce some kind of benefit for the other parts of the soul. So here I'll read that, and then that's where we'll end this review of Plato for today. He says, in light of this argument, can it profit anyone to acquire gold unjustly if by doing so he enslaves the best part of himself to the most vicious? If you got gold by enslaving your son or daughter to savage and evil men, it would not profit you, no matter how much gold you got. So how then can you fail to be wretched if you pitilessly enslave the most divine part of yourself to the most godless and polluted, and accept golden gifts in return for a more terrible destruction than when Erephiles took the necklace in return for her husband's soul? This is a Greek myth, an ancient Greek myth. So, you know, that's the voice of Socrates and Plato speaking to you from the grave from thousands of years ago. And I mean, of course, we don't necessarily harbor all the same assumptions. Not everyone would agree that the soul exists or that there's this three-way division of it. Views about the republic and its adequacy as a system of government or society could also be questioned or challenged or objected to. But it's one interesting and very durable perspective that's lasted for thousands of years, and it still does inform some people's view on how they ought to live their lives. So here's one person giving you their account of what makes a life go well. Empower your reason. Allow the lower parts of your soul to do their job according to their virtue, but keep them in check. And, you know, kind of mirror structurally the way that that soul is going with the ideal condition of the perfect republic, or at least according to the writing of these Greeks. Now, this is not the only account, though, of what makes a human life go well. Like I said, there's a few others, and we're going to see at least one other look on Tuesday, which will be our last day for lecture. Tuesday, I want you guys to for sure read the Jean-Paul Sartre article, Existentialism. That's going to be a major contrast with the approach given here by Plato. And then I also guess I want you guys to read the article Death by Thomas Nagel. So we're going to actually have to miss a few of the last pieces in the syllabus. To be clear, we're not going to read the Derek Parfit, and we're not going to read The Absurd by Nagel. So there's just two articles in the whole semester. Maybe there's one way earlier that I took off, but I can't remember. Anyway, there's just these last two articles that will not get included, okay? So just know that. I want you to read two more things. That's Existentialism by Sartre and Death by Nagel. And I'll try to cover those two things on Tuesday, and that'll be our last meeting where we have a lecture. In the meantime, over the weekend, make sure to do some work on your paper so that you're ready to turn it in on Tuesday, and also be ready to receive my study guide so that you can start getting your answers and so on prepared. It's going to be a lot like the midterm study guide, just with additional questions to account for the second half of the semester here. Okay, everybody, well, there's a few minutes to go, but I don't think I can do much with those couple minutes on the next article. So let us go for now. Thanks, everyone, for attending and just participating. Another interesting meeting with you guys. How many questions will there be on the final? Well, I think on your midterm, it was like 7 out of 10 or 11 that you had to answer. And so you have a little more time for the final. It's an hour and 50 minutes instead of an hour and 15. So that's 110 instead of 75 minutes. So I'll probably have you answer at least one more, like maybe 8 out of 11, or on the study guide, well, it's going to be double the length of the midterm, so study guide. So I think when the midterm study guide was issued, it was around like 40 or 40 something. So it'll be up at around 80. And, you know, I'm not going to ask all of those. I'm going to select from a curated list, maybe 11 or 12, and then that subset will appear on the actual test form. And we will have our review session, so we'll get a good opportunity to go over all the things, and you'll have plenty of time to prepare a study guide or an answer key. Okay, guys, so thanks for your question, and if anything else you need, do let me know by email. I'll be checking them throughout the weekend, okay? So for now, take it easy, have a good one, and stay healthy, everyone. I'll see you very soon. Okay, bye.